Rather than trying to make some epic project, it was like, right, let's just make this really small, addictive toy that's kind of finishable in a short time frame. I'm John Ribbins. I'm creative director at Roll7. Back in 2012, we were working on marketing stuff and it was super boring, and I'd gotten back into skateboarding at the same time and been playing a lot of mobile games. Infinite runners were the trend game at that point. You fall over a lot in skateboarding and it's a hard sport to do, and that fitted with that idea of infinite runners being really challenging. So that's when I kind of started playing around with the idea of making a really simple infinite runner where you were a skateboarder. I've been making video games all the time as like a hobby thing, but I always had these huge ideas, right? Like it's going to be an RPG adventure game with this like open world thing, or it's an FPS and it's going to be multiplayer. And so I had all these prototypes and I never finished anything because they were always too big. When it came to starting to make OlliOlli, as it was known at that point, I was like, I'm just going to make this really simple thing, something I can actually finish in 6 months in my evenings and weekends. That's kind of what I did, and it was really rough and really ropey, and I gave it to Simon, who I ran Roll7 with. He kind of came back from holiday and was like, dude, that's the only thing I played the whole time I was away. It's awesome, we have to do something with it. We'd made this other mobile game called Gets to the Exit, which no one had really heard about, and we were still trying to get people interested, and we ended up going to Develop Conference in Brighton. There was a dude there and he had a pair of DC skate shoes on, and I was like, he looks like my people. So I went and said hello and ended up having a chat, and it was this guy called James Marsden who made Velocity. So I kind of showed him OlliOlli and was like, oh dude, I've made this skateboarding game. He kind of played it for a bit, and he was like, you should totally show this to Sony, they'd be interested in it. The next day there was an email from James, and he CC'd in Shahid, who at the time was in charge of creative content at Sony, and he'd just put John, Shahid, fight, as an introduction. And so they said, yeah, come down to the office in Soho and show us your stuff. We showed them a bunch of the games we'd done for marketing campaigns and gun for hire stuff, and obviously they're like not interested, and then Tom's kind of like kicking me under the table, like, show them the skateboarding game, show them the skateboarding game. So kind of sheepishly kind of was like, we've also kind of built this thing and it's really ugly and we're not really sure if it works, and gave it to Shahid, and he literally for 20 minutes just sat playing this game. It was really hard at that point, so he was just sitting there going, shit, damn it, swearing to himself in the corner. And yeah, after 20 minutes he kind of just put the phone down and was like, do you want to bring that to PlayStation Vita? Kind of went, yeah, that sounds great. Well, let's make it happen. And like that was the end of the meeting. Me and Tom walked out the Sony offices and were like, we should probably find out what the Vita is, shouldn't we? At that point when we started the game, I built it in this ClickTeam Fusion thing, which is effectively game-making tool for kids. And there's no way to get the game from there onto a Vita, right? It doesn't translate. You can't click a button and build for Vita. But we had a programmer who we'd been working with, Nikos Asfis, and he knew C++, and he was like, well, I'll just get the SDK and we'll code it from scratch, which seemed like the only way to go. And now when we speak to people, they're like, are you insane? So for the first 3 months of building OlliOlli, there was nothing on the screen. And I remember in the beginning of March, we managed to draw one grey pixel to the top left-hand corner of the Vita screen. And it was like a massive celebration because that's the first time we'd actually like made the code draw a pixel on the screen. There's a huge jump between making a fun toy and making a finished game that people can get hours of enjoyment from, and they feel like they're getting better and they're being rewarded. The biggest learning curve was that when your concept actually hits reality, it has to completely change. The original design doc for what we wanted to do with OlliOlli was that it was an RPG, and that when you started you didn't have any tricks, and then you'd learn tricks gradually as you went through, and it would have this like skill tree of tricks that unlock. And there was a point where we got all the tricks in and we were like, right, now we've got to lock them all out and you'll learn them gradually as you go. And we did that, and it was like, well, this isn't fun anymore because it was cool and it had all the tricks. And we realized, that it was actually way better when it was super hard, but you could do everything from the beginning. That was actually like real skateboarding. Give everyone everything from the start, but you have to develop the skill to be able to land those tricks and pull them off. One of the biggest changes we actually made to the game is that in the original prototype, there was only 2 ways to land your trick. You either landed it perfect or you didn't, and if you didn't, you slammed. It made the game insanely hard. And it was actually a suggestion from one of the QAs at Sony that there should be more granularity in the landing system. So instead of it just being perfect or death, you could also land it sick or sloppy, and that affected your combo, right? So the better you land the trick, the more points you get. But if you don't land it brilliantly, it's not that you have to start the entire level again. When we built it as a mobile game, you only had touch controls, and it was really simple. It was left and right. And then when we started building it for the Vita, and then obviously subsequently PS4, you've got analog sticks and face buttons and triggers. Initially, push was one button, land was another button. You held another button to grind, another button to spin. And the first time we had to go and show the game to Sony, they were like, it's unplayable. You have to figure out what's going on, it's just too confusing. The press X to land thing, which became the core of what OlliOlli is, was like, wait, I think we can just put it all on X. And it felt really weird to ignore like all these other buttons that were available and be like, no, it's just the X button, that's all you need. OlliOlli, the original prototype, was an infinite runner. And so like all infinite runners, it was procedurally generated. So we didn't build levels, we just had a stack of assets and it threw them at you, right? Give you some flat ground, and then we'll throw you a staircase, and then we'll throw you a handrail. Initially, we were like, well, we'll just build a set level. We won't do it randomly generated. We'll build this thing that you can play through and it takes about a minute. Eventually, we'll figure out how to make it random. And so everyone was just sitting and playing this one prototype level that we'd made, and it turned into this high score battle. You'd be like, I got 168,000. And then the programmer would come back and be like, I got 168,500, because you can throw an extra 180 on that rail. And we realized if we make this randomly generated, we lose that joy, the most fun bit of where we'd got to. Again, like, concept hits reality. Once we actually built it, that was better. The initial art style for OlliOlli was just what I'd drawn in paint for the original mobile game. From my side, I'd always felt like no 2D game had ever really nailed the look of skateboarding. Skateboarding looks cool when you watch people doing it. It looks awesome. We really focused in on animation. Like if you slow the tricks down, or if you compare them to YouTube videos of people actually doing those tricks, the board flips exactly how it should. If you do a 360 flip, the board flips like a 360 flip, even though it's just 32 little pixels on the screen. Even crazy details like the wheels on the board keep spinning when they're in the air, even though it's only 6 little pixels around. You can still see it's rotating when you're flicking the trick in the air. Probably completely unnecessary attention to detail, but I guess that's what we were aiming for. And there's another thing, right, which is if you do a 180 on a skateboard, you turn the other way, right? And so no 2D game let me do a 180 and skate the opposite way round. And so we've been really dead set on this idea that you'd be able to spin in OlliOlli and ride the other way, which was this massive rod for our own backs, right? Because it's 2D, so he's not an actual 3D person. If you turn him the other way, you've got to draw every frame of animation with him facing in the opposite direction. That sprite sheet it started off at like 300 frames, and then it was 2,000 frames, and then he finished it and it was like 10,000 frames, and we were like, cool. Now we need to draw all of that with him facing the opposite way around, so start again. People would play it and they'd be like, I can't really identify what it is I'm supposed to grind. And then you're kind of back to the drawing board like, well, I just thought that would be obvious. Like, it's a rail, of course you know how to grind it, but when the game's clicking by at super speed, it's hard to spot that. It's now something that's permeated like all the rest of our games, but we had this moment where we were like, we need a visual language. We need a thing that's instantly understandable when you're playing. There was a moment building a Russian level where we were like, rails are red and obstacles are gray and the floor is white. So you don't even really need to know what the obstacle is. As long as it's grey, you avoid it. If it's white, you can land on it. If it's red, you can grind it. And then you could kind of make anything. You can make a rocket, and as long as the rocket's red, people knew they could grind the rocket. We can do it just through colour. When the game came out, we thought it was going to fail. We were happy it was done, and we were like proud of the fact that we built a game and finished it, but we didn't think it was that good, because by the time you get to that point in the game, all you see is the mistakes. I think the first review that came in was like a 7 out of 10. And we were like, all right, 7 out of 10, not bad. Like, we did okay, guys. And we had this dinosaur cutout that someone had given us at the studio, so we had the T-Rex review. So we'd started off with like the 7 out of 10, halfway up, it's like all right. And then suddenly we had some 9s on the T-Rex's face. We'd started to run out of room on the T-Rex's face for the 9s and the 10s, so it had to start coming down his neck, and we were like, oh my gosh, I think we've actually done something that people really like. And honestly, we couldn't have been more surprised at the reviews that came through. Maybe being that critical of our own thing is kind of maybe what got us to the point of making something that people really liked. When we found out we were nominated for the BAFTA, we were like, well, that's as far as this goes. So we went out for like a lunch, bought a bottle of champagne and celebrated, because we were like, that's pretty much the end of the BAFTA joy. In our minds, there was no way we were going to win. We were up against FIFA, Championship Manager, Forza, I think, an F1 title. Like, it was like us and AAA games, like beautiful AAA games as well. We were the second award, and there was a point where Tom turned to me after the first award and went, you should probably write something on your phone just in case.
And the BAFTA goes to OlliOlli.
I was still writing away when they were like, and the winner for sports is OlliOlli. We were like, oh my God! And the only thought in my mind was like, oh crap, I've got to read this out now, and I've literally written it in like 2 minutes. I hope I've written something okay. When we launched OlliOlli in 2013, we didn't even think people would like it. So to be up here talking to you people is not only a wonderful and complete surprise, we're super honoured that you think the game is worthy of this accolade. I think we were the only studio that brought everybody up on stage, which I don't think you're supposed to do, but it was like, you know what, everyone's worked really hard on this, everyone should get some of the joy. So yeah, that was a good night, really good night.